The forgiven servant that Jesus talked about is an interesting story. One accountant said in this story, this person was forgiven like $12 million. Like $12 million. And then he goes to a person who owes him $20 and says, "Give me my $20. And he kind of roughs the person up a bit. "Give me my $20 now," when he has just been forgiven $12 million. The good news is we are forgiven. But the other news is we are to forgive as we have been forgiven. And if we can't forgive other people, then it means that we're not taking our own forgiveness very seriously. That we're not really accepting the forgiveness that God has offered to us. If we have been forgiven much, then we need to recognize our need to forgive other people as well. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, because we have been forgiven a great debt. So we seek to forgive others, not because they deserve it. You know, the world teaches us to play the blame game. Whose fault is it? We get all consumed with whose fault is it? Who is at fault? Who is at blame? We're like an insurance company. Who is at fault here? But that's not the important question. We all are at fault at some times, some ways. We all are sinners. The more important question is, how do you move on? And it is through forgiveness, and it is through forgiving other people. You know, when Charles and Diana got married in 1981, the king and queen of Spain, Queen Sophia, did not show up at their wedding because in 1704, Britain stole away Gibraltar from Spain. So they were not going to go to Charles and Diana's wedding. You know, the good news is when Prince William got married last year, Queen Sophia showed up with their kids. So maybe there is hope yet. We live in a world full of grudges, and where we are taught to hold grudges. An eye for an eye until there are no more eyes left. A tooth for a tooth until everybody's toothless. But there is good news, and the good news is there's a way to get beyond revenge. And it is not easy. In 1983, the world was amazed when Pope John Paul II visited in prison Mehmet Ali Achka, who tried to assassinate him and who crippled him, who wounded him, came close to killing him. And the Pope, for 21 minutes, held his hand inside that prison cell. And when he left the prison cell, the press, the paparazzi said, "What did you ask him? What did you ask him? What did you say?" And he said, "It was about forgiveness." And they laughed a bit and talked a bit. How can that happen? Well, he's the Pope, you know. Popes, maybe they can get away with it. But me, maybe I'm different. No, Jesus didn't say, okay, if you're the Pope, you can forgive other people, but everybody else, you know. He doesn't say that. He says to his disciples, of those who follow him, follow in his footsteps, who even on the cross said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." My Bible study class gave me a book called In the Presence of Mine Enemies, which is about two missionaries to the Philippines, the Burnhams, Gracia and Martin. And in our century, the 21st century, they were missionaries to the Philippines, and they were captured by some Muslim terrorists, the Abu Sayyaf group of Al-Qaeda. And for about a year, they were dragged from place to place, didn't have enough food, were threatened with being beheaded almost every day. and eventually Martin was killed. And Gracia came back to the States, and after time, and time is an important part of forgiveness sometimes. After some time had passed, Gracia wrote these words. What happened to Martin and me was no one's fault except that of sinful human beings, the kind we went to the Philippines to minister to. I refuse to let their sin dampen my joy. No amount of pining and complaining will bring my wonderful husband back. I choose instead to rejoice in his memory. You see, what forgiveness means, it's not that there are not scars in the hands or in the forehead. It's not that the scars or disappear. What it means is that you're able to move on and not be caught in the past. It is a miracle when we are able to forgive. And sometimes we have to have miracles happen over and over and over about the same offense. In the days of horse and carriages, a bishop drove his wagon to the church, and he parked his wagon, and after the service was over, he got back in his wagon to leave, and he couldn't move. And he looked back, and somebody had put big rocks in his carriage. And so he had to spend a long time unloading these rocks that were in the back of his carriage. 20 years later, some 3 guys knocked at the bishop's door, and they said, "Bishop, do you remember those rocks that were in your carriage 20 years ago?" And the bishop thought for a minute, and he said, "Rocks?" He said, "Well, we were the guys who put those rocks in your wagon, and we're sorry, so sorry about that." He said, "Oh, you were the fellows who've been carrying around those rocks for 20 years. Some of you have been carrying around a lot of rocks. And Jesus Christ says it's time for you to get rid of those rocks, to be forgiven, and then also to pass that forgiveness on. Amen.